I've been working on some pretty big, long-form videos lately, but I wanted to get some fun lore out to you guys. I had been approached by Weaponmaster570 on Reddit about a really cool subject. We've all really wanted Mousillon to be playable for Bretonnia. Namely, we've wanted to play the Red Duke, but there is a different option. One that might be heavily out of left field, but it doesn't require adding quote-unquote another vampire lore to the game. Malbod, the Black Knight, has had a pretty crazy ride throughout the lore. We last saw Malbod during the end times in the Bretonnian Civil War, where he reveals himself to be a claimant to the throne of Bretonnia, and also, dun dun dun, a fucking vampire. He ended up having a relatively lackluster end for a character that had really haunted the Bretonnian lore for about a decade, and not like Bretonnian lore decade, but our time decade. But let's swing this back further to the first iteration of Mallobaude. Warhammer RPG 2nd Edition had a supplement called Barony of the Damned. This really goes in depth about the origins of the Black Knight. So in this video, I want to talk about those origins. I want to discuss a possible Total War Warhammer 2 implementation of the Black Knight, not simply as a vampire. That's too boring, and at this point, the Red Duke would have been cool back in Warhammer 1, but at this point, I think it's just a little too late. Rather, I see Malbod as an anti-grail knight. So let's dive into the lore, and we'll go into what I have in mind for some possible mechanics after that. Keep in mind, guys, this is purely conjecture. This is baseless speculation. I'm just going off of stuff that I've seen in the way that Creative Assembly implements stuff from Warhammer, and a lot of the really cool things from the lore that we could possibly expect if they were to incorporate Malbod into Total War Warhammer. Now, the history of Malbod fits pretty similarly into the end times history. He was suspected to be a possible illegitimate son of King Lowen Leoncoeur. Other reports say that he was a commoner that was raised to knight by the Duke of Lyonesse. And another story tells us that he was a knight-errant that rode out on an errantry war to the border princes and was the only one of the group to return. Either way, all this already plays so well into the mystique that surrounds the enigmatic Black Knight. The tale is then told of a promising young knight-errant that was escalated to the rank of Knight of the Realm. And as you well know, the progression of the knightly code of Bretonnia is knight-errant to Knight of the Realm, which is typically in service of a baron or duke. And then after that, a Knight of the Realm can choose to give up everything to pursue his quest to become a Grail Knight. This, in turn, makes him a Bretonnian gypsy, also known as a questing knight. Now, Malbod did just that. In the same stroke that he was made a Knight of the Realm, he picked up his quest for the Grail. And as a questing knight, he accomplished a fair bit of incredible deeds. And I say that with a hint of wonder and disbelief, because I feel like some of this has to be hyperbole. Questing knights don't typically face these kinds of odds alone. Sure, individual large beasts they'll go toe-to-toe with, but they'll rally the peasantry around them or aid military efforts, whatever is in service of the Grail. Malbod was able to clear the entire valley of Massif Orcal of Greenskins, which is a play on words you guys understand of massive orc, right? So Massif Orcal of Greenskins, while also cleansing the Grey Mountains of Harpies and fighting back an entire goblin tribe at Axebite Pass. In addition, he also had a hand in rooting out a chaos cult in Liangui and clearing the monstrous blue hag from the forest of Shalom. So, there is a great deal of epic stories told of this young, valorous questing knight charging into insurmountable odds and coming out on top. And I think that's really the crux of the questing knight, right? To face the impossible with your faith in the lady as your shield and these righteous zealots that only know defeat in death. Malbod carries on this way for a good chunk of years. Over time, he grows weary of constantly questing to no avail, and he comes upon a Grail Chapel. He has this moment where he, overcome with anger, ennui, perhaps even some despair, he shares this with the Grail damsel, asking, why has the lady forsaken me? Or have I not done enough? Are there more beasts to be slain? And the damsel cools his tempers, telling him that this is the point of the quest. The lady appears to those who persevere, even when all hope is lost. The quest for the Grail is not about recognition and strength of arms, but rather a test of the spirit and strength of the soul of the righteous. The book's wording is not whether he can slay a forest full of monsters, but whether you can come to understand that you may never sip from the Grail and yet still continue to seek it. This notion, it galvanizes Malbod, to which he figures, well, I mean, if I just need to keep fighting the odds, then where better than the lost duchy itself? Off to Moussillon, our courageous knight goes, fighting hordes of undead at the Orphan Hills, which is actually a hill named after a bunch of kids who have parents, so it's really weird. Slaying through heaps of Skaven at the bridge of Pont Résolu, and other major victories. Malbod persevered through all manner of horrors that Moussillon had to offer him. And one evening, after chasing a band of beastmen through the forest of Ardennes, he reached a creek. And what had originally seemed to be this kind of putrid, brackish water shifted and cleared from his eyes to reveal a beautiful, serene lake with an eerie kind of mist playing about it. A single hand reached out from those waters, grasping a resplendent gold and magnificent grail. Reaching for the grail, Malbod drank deep. Now, only one of two outcomes can happen. You can choose poorly and be killed by the waters of the grail, being seen as unworthy of the lady's blessing. Or you can choose wisely and be revivified by the waters, becoming enchanted by the lady's blessing and glowing with a saintly aura. We talk a lot about how Grail Knights are these kind of terrestrial incarnations or manifestations of the lady's will or faith made manifest, you know, and how every single Grail Knight in their own right is equivalent to an army of lesser foes. And it's really kind of hypes up how strong Grail Knights are in the books of Bretonnia, and all the many army books, all the many Black Library books, all the RPG books. But it kind of almost goes over the top, especially when you're playing Total War Warhammer, where you have, like, what is it, like a unit of 60 as a unit of Grail Guardians or Grail Knights. And it just really kind of inflates how important they are, because when you talk about the tabletop, there's only a unit of Grail Knights is 5 men. That's it. It's no bigger. It really kind of drives home the gravitas of the Grail Knight. But for Malbod, nothing happened. He waited and waited, but he did not die, nor was he imbued with some otherworldly fervor. Instead, he was granted a revelation, beyond the Grail, beyond the lady, to what she truly was. And this disgusted our now wayward knight, and turned his stomach sour and his heart dropped. I mean, this is everything that he had ever fought for, all he had ever fought for, all he had lived for, he discovered was a lie. Seeking death, he rode out into Moussillon once more, looking to end the lie that was the life that he led. Very histrionic, but that's, you know, that's Bretonnia for you, right? You know, over the top, foppish, and a lot of fucking pretty colors. But there's a pretty cool quote from the RPG book that reads, "His sorrow turned to anger, his anger into hatred, which, if you know Star Wars, Malbod became a Sith. Swap fear for sorrow, and you have the quote, fear leads to anger leads to hate, and hate leads to the dark side." Sometime after discovering Force Lightning, Malbod decides that the only way to end the lie that is the lady is to overthrow the crown of Bretonnia, supplanting the lady with another religion. It doesn't really talk about what he wants to replace the lady with. It's more that he wants to just simply end the lie that is the faith of the lady. And remember, this isn't overly a war of vengeance. It's more a means of righting the wrongs that were done to Bretonnia, freeing Bretonnia from the shackles of the false lady or the false faith. Thus begins Malbod's grand schemes to first claim the lost duchy and then Bretonnia. Securing the allegiance of many of the nobles of Moussillon, he solidifies his claim, working under the auspice of the original rumor that he is a bastard son of Lone Leoncoeur. Claiming Moussillon and the Dussault Palace, Mallobaude becomes the third in a long line of evil rulers that all start with M-A-L, you know, Mal. Like Maldred, Malfleur, you know, the typical names of evil people. And Malbod himself plays off of the Arthurian legend story of Mordred, the bastard son of Arthur and Morgana Le Fay, who lays waste to Camelot as well as mortally wounding Arthur, sending him off to Avalon. But with that in mind, you can imagine how this plays out. As his rapport grows with other nobles, Malbod spreads his influence out from Moussillon, allying more nobles to his cause, while also causing unrest throughout the kingdom. Now that Malbod isn't bound by the tenets of the knightly code, chivalry, and the lady, he can expand his army well outside of the normal confines of a Bretonnian military force. Mercenaries, gunpowder, war machines all find their way to his banner. In addition, Malbod is willing to make dark pacts and enact whatever means necessary to accomplish his ends. Vampires, necromancers, witches, all manner of undead answer the call of the Black Knight of Mousillon. Malbod has this kind of haunting presence, described as speaking in a sonorous voice, which adds to this really menacing image of a knight clad entirely in black armor, never showing his face unless around his most trusted of confidants. One of my favorite bits of the lore here is that his trusted retinue is known as the Knights of the Black Grail. And that is just awesome. Imagine these knights in kind of smoky charcoal and black armor with the crest of Mousillon, which is this black field with a gold serpent, and having lances that are the evil mirror of the Grail Knights. Maybe black and red fire. The hardest nipples in the land over here. Now, in the more recent lore, Malbod goes from an avenging anti-grail knight to a vampire. And this is where our story picks up and goes into the Bretonnian Civil War. And we covered that in the video on Bretonnia End Times, so I'll link that at the end here of the video for you guys to dive in on. But it fits that narrative a little bit more than this one. This is more about the history and the origin of Malbod, and the Bretonnian Civil War kind of goes into what he does with this revelation and how he kind of pursues it into an outright war against Lo-and-the-Unker, and where he kind of ends up at towards the end of that. So I'll save that for that video. But what I want to segue into instead is how Malbod could be included in Total War Warhammer. And I think there are so many amazing options for this guy that it'd make for an extremely interesting take on the otherwise kind of normal Bretonnian campaign. And let's talk about Malbod and the faction itself, or himself, first. Now, CA could play off of the latter or later portions of the lore, making him into a vampire, but I think we've had enough vampire lords to last us like the next 4 games are not even announced. It's a joke, it's not going to announce 4 more games. Rather, I'd envision Malbod to be the opposite of Lowen. Lowen has abilities that are geared towards defense, such as his shield. He does have some aggressive abilities, obviously, like being able to debuff things, but I see more of an aggressive stance from Malbod, as the role of this rallying force against Bretonnia, and really a very devastating one. Something cool would be, the Sword of the Black Grail that gives a passive leadership and melee attack bonus to everything around Malbod. This is a general who picked up disgraced knights and gave them purpose, so they'd have a pretty renewed kind of sense of purpose around him. And I'd like to also see maybe that he causes terror, and also be unbreakable. Think about it. He has created this terrifying imagery as a knight in black, harrying the land. In addition, he has a singular purpose in uprooting the lady. I don't see him as the kind to break for really anything, and this would fit the profile of an anti-grail knight, as it were, kind of mirroring that ability to be immune to psychology and unbreakable, and unwilling to kind of flinch in the face of anything. Heroic killing blow might be a bit overkill, but I want this character that is all about aggression. The natural high armor and melee defense of a knight, sure, but I envision this knight that is filled with a fervor that matches the zeal of the Grail Knight's faith. And we could get kind of gamey on this as well and say that he has an ability called maybe the Banner of Mousillon or the Call of the Black Knight, which summons a unit of skeleton warriors, but that feels a little too necromantic to me. Though it could be maybe something in the vein of Gaze of the Black Knight, and it's a melee defense and leadership debuff either in an aura or as a targeted ability. So if it's an aura, it would be like a 6 melee attack and 8 leadership debuff while he's in combat. Or if it's a targeted ability, it'd be something like 26 net reduction to melee attack and a huge hit to their leadership. Is this kind of terrifying knight that is marauding the lands, has now focused his eyes on you, and he's going right for you. And that would kind of add to that overall persona that we've created for him. Perhaps a persistent campaign ability might be Usurper of Bretonnia, giving you a natural melee attack and leadership bonus against Bretonnia, much like the researchable decrees to gain bonuses fighting other nations that Bretonnia's standard campaign would get. And I might be kind of getting a little carried away, but it's easy to really go off on tangents about this, so I want to hear what you guys think are some cool suggestions for abilities, weapons, armor, what have you for Malbod, the Black Knight of Mousillon. Pivoting on that, let's talk about Mousillon itself. Now, this should feel like a Bretonnia campaign. And what makes up a Bretonnia campaign? 2 big things: unification of Bretonnia and the chivalric code. If the entire point of Malbod is to be anti-chivalry, what if the chivalric code was reversed? You get more, you get more anti-chivalry for sacking and or raising settlements, killing hostages, military victories, etc. So rather than doing what is upright, it's more about doing what's either wrong or purely opportunistic. Your goal, after all, is to unite Bretonnia under your cause, not the lady. And in doing so, the Machiavellian ends justifying the means will be rampant here. Why keep prisoners alive if they can rejoin their forces later? Why keep settlements around that don't give in? Malbod would give defeated nobles one chance to join him, or else they would be put to the sword in the lore. This in turn plays really well to the mechanics surrounding the unification of Bretonnia. It could easily emulate the Norskin mechanic of defeating a tribal leader allows for a confederation. It fits really well into the story behind Malbod himself, but I think that even having a tech tree that's similar to the standard Bretonnia one of gaining enough favor to handle confederating diplomacy is just fine. These same decrees could exist as far as attacking other nations, and the unifying technologies could be relegated to more central or south Bretonnia, because I mean, you're not going to be able to convince Loan the Uncur to join you, but with most of them starting out hating you, all of these nations of Bretonnia. You know, I thought of some other crazy ideas like the ability to give the blood kiss to other nations, making it easier to confederate, as per the end times version of Malbod, but again, that might be too vampire-y. I know that in the end times, he was converting the nobles of every single land, which would make taking it over way easier for him. He wasn't going about making every single person a vampire, but oh, hey, this is a very important noble. Uh-oh, you're a vampire now. So I guess I could see that kind of blood kiss role playing. Perhaps using anti-chivalry to help in diplomatic relations, increasing it naturally with some nations versus others the more it increases. Who knows? There's lots of interesting ways this could be done. Maxing out the anti-chivalry meter, though, has to net a reward like chivalry does. And a lot of things came to mind. Summon Krell kind of came to mind, but he's already with the Barl Legion and Kemmler. What I settled on, though, was the ability to raise up an army of disgraced knights. That is similar to a WoW mechanic, having war coordination targets that you can use to help weaken the land. Remember, you aren't going to be able to bankroll large armies fast due to your lack of trading partners and early enemies, but I think this is a good way to help balance that. And as for the roster of Musion, I think that it's pretty needless to say we'd be looking at a Bretonnia/Vampire Counts hybrid here, which is a really cool concept and one that I'd absolutely love to see. You know, imagine your heroes category filled with necromancers, fallen paladins, vampires, and witches, which I'd classify as evil damsels just to get access to the lore of life, which I honestly feel is a real necessity in the Bretonnian roster, most of the time in my opinion at least. From there, zombie peasants maybe, men-at-arms, disgraced knights of the realm, disgraced knights errant, ghouls, just a very fun mixture. You could even have high-cost knights of the Black Grail to mirror Grail Knights or Grail Guardians. What I think this army has to have is a lot of fun mixtures of otherwise normal troops. Not even standard men-at-arms, you know, you could even say mercenaries at arms, which might fight a bit better than men-at-arms but have a higher upkeep, a low initial cost, and are prone to running perhaps, maybe a mechanic around that. But what I definitely think this army has to have is gunpowder. Either handgunners or cannons, free company militia in some form. Like I said earlier, Malbod has taken the knightly code, has forsaken the knightly code. We can do whatever means necessary to accomplish his goals. All in all, I think that this makes for a really crazy and different combination that we haven't seen mixed together before, or at least just yet. But that brings us to the end of our Black Knight of Bretonnia. Now this is just simply a proposed legendary lord, and it would change the way that Bretonnia is played as a whole. I'm not even sure if CA would even want to invest time into this because it's kind of it's a Warhammer 1 lord, so I'm not really sure how it works. But I think that just simply getting the Red Duke at this point would feel cheap. And with the Barl Legion already a playable vampire presence in the area, this makes for a richer, more charismatic campaign rather than simply a character who turned Blood Dragon. Now don't get me wrong, Elsif has an amazing story. If you don't know the story of the Red Duke, that should appear in the upper right now. Now hopefully you guys enjoyed this different take on a proposed legendary lord, and I'm more than happy to keep doing these more in-depth propositions of lords that are a bit askew from the normal one-to-one style lores that we see added from existing army books that I typically kind of go through. But let me know if that kind of interests you guys. I'm more than happy to do that for you. But plenty of goodies yet to come, guys. Still working on my next Primarch video, which should be out around this weekend. And End Times Empire, which you guys have been asking for some time, is coming out soon as well. Expect that one to be on the channel sometime next week. That has been what I have been working on a lot lately, is just these longer, more in-depth videos that require a lot more research, jumping into a little bit more book work and looking around online a little bit more. But as always, guys, thanks so much for watching, and take care.